Hello, welcome back. This is Adventures of a Book Hunter, episode 12. And this is the third attempt I've made at making this particular video. For one reason or another, I've been stalled so far in uh, documenting this last little adventure. Hopefully, third time is truly the charm. In any event, topic I want to talk about today is a little different than what I normally do. This book is going to be a little bit about the philosophy and practicality of book hunting and collecting. And it's based on some media that I've consumed over the last several months, BookTube, Bookstagram, where people are talking about the fear or the realization that they have become book dragons. And what is a book dragon? A book dragon is someone who acquires many, many, many books that they're not reading. They're oftentimes a book dragon reads very little at all, and they're accumulating books basically as objects and not as readable literature. And today, inspired by this theme, I'm wearing my book dragon T-shirt. Recent gift from my wife, but uh, I really love the shirt. Really liked it a lot. But I thought it was fitting for the topic of this video. The other videos you see, or other content you see, revolving around the idea of the book dragon, is pretty negative, and understandably so. These people are bemoaning the fact that they have realized they are book dragons, and they see it as a perversion of book collecting, of aspiring to be better readers, etc. Um, and I myself, by their definition, have certainly historically been a book dragon. Um, my collection in my private library peaked at a little more than 3,000 books about 2 years ago. Um, at that time, if you'd asked me why I was gathering all these books, my rationalization would have been um, my library is basically one huge reference. Um, that I don't have to keep all these ideas and facts in my head if I can keep them where they're easily accessible. So the idea is like a medieval sage. I have the knowledge at my fingertips, but I don't have to keep it in my head. I don't have to know it immediately. I just have to know where to look for it. And so the thought was to have a book collection that was very broad in scope. Every nonfiction topic that I could think of. In fact, I started hunting books to fit certain categories when I realized there were weaknesses in the system. I don't have enough science, so I'm collecting more science. And then underneath science, you don't have any books about chemistry. Got to find some stuff about chemistry. Got to find stuff about astrophysics. Got to find stuff about biology, botany, zoology, so on and so forth. Don't have enough to cover contemporary social issues. So I have to go out and find that. And in my book hunting, started to get an eye for basically this will go into my reference library. And in the meantime, I'm still getting fiction and classic literature. But that was the idea. Have a very broad collection um, that most of which I don't ever intend to read, unless something inspires me to read that stuff. But in any event, so basically, I'm collecting books like people collect stamps. Put them on display. I look at them every now and then. I look at them constantly, but I'm not using them. I'm not reading them. And in those years, basically until the last year, I was reading very little. I was accumulating a lot of books, but reading very little. So I was classic definition of a book dragon. Before I go any farther, I don't necessarily think that it's horrible to be a book dragon, but if you find yourself in the guise of a book dragon, you just need to ask yourself a couple of quick questions. Am I harming the rest of my life financially because I'm accumulating so many books? Am I burdening my life down with all this physical stuff? Okay. Now, for me, the first problem really wasn't a problem. I've never spent a lot of money on books. I've accumulated a lot of books, but book to book, I'm not spending a lot of money to acquire these books. Um, in a little bit, I'm going to show you 8 books that I acquired in the last 3 weeks that I intend to keep. And for the books I'm keeping, I have less than $2 invested in them. One cost me $1 at a thrift store, and the other was part of a fill a grocery bag for $1 at a library sale. So actually, if you just divvied it up, that one cost me less than 10 cents because I can stuff one of those grocery bags when I'm at one of those sales. Um, but getting back to the idea of book dragoning, when I peaked around 3,000 books, I realized I did have an issue because at the time I was there in that part of my life about 2 years ago, I had to move, and I had to move to a situation where I did not have space to come close to displaying 3,000 books, or even a fraction of that. So they all went into storage. I had just a handful of books that I had access to day to day. 99+% of those books were in a storage unit, which does nobody any good. It just cost me money because I have to put them in storage. Um, Moved again a few months later to a new residence where I had plenty of room to redisplay those 3,000 books. And it took a few weeks, but I did it. Got the collection back into shape. And in the days leading up to my 3,000 book collection, I reached capacity several times where I just didn't have any room to display books anymore. And so then to get more books, instead of getting rid of books to replace them with new ones, I just came up with more ingenious ways to increase my display capacity. Did a little bit of that, about a year and a half ago when I moved into my last residence. Um, but started to after moving those books around a couple times, which is a very formidable task, decided I might need to reconsider my whole philosophy of the personal library. And so, even at that point, I started to downsize. First, I got rid of duplicates of every particular single book I had. I found I had 3 copies of the Odyssey by Homer. I kept one, donated 2. Lots of stuff like that, where I had multiple versions of the same book. So I just went through all those, made, at the time, tough decisions about which edition I wanted to keep, and the rest got donated or, sent someplace, either as trade for little free libraries, donated straightly to libraries, given to friends, you know. At that point, even then, in those days, donated to the Hatter bookstore, you know, those sorts of things. And so I got rid of quite a few books that way. Now I started to look at the collection again and thought, where I have many books on a single narrow topic, narrow it down to where I keep the very best I have covering a particular topic. For instance, um, at that point, I had probably 7 or 8 different biographies of Abraham Lincoln. Um, and Abraham Lincoln is one of those historical figures that is so huge. I feel you can justify having multiple biographies because they can cover different things, aspects of his life, his political career, so on and so forth. Um, um, from 8, I'm now down to I think 4 or 5. Um, I had several books on George Washington. I'm now down to 1. I've several books on Thomas Jefferson. I'm now down to I think 2 biographies and 1 book of his collected writings, so forth. I had 5 books on the Battle of Gettysburg. I'm now down to I think 2. But that process started, let's say, really about a year ago, and I moved a lot of books out that way. And that's been the trend. And even more so, when somebody needed a particular book, I've gotten to the point where I can just, oh, here you go. And and you know, 2 years ago that would have been unthinkable. Well, I will look for you a copy. I will try and hunt a copy for you out in the wild, but I'm keeping mine. And I've gotten to the point where it's like, no, here you go. You want it. I'm probably not going to read it anytime terribly soon. Do some good in the world. I'm passing that book along. So anyway, so I'm trying to reform my dragonish ways, long and short. Um, and been doing pretty good with it. Books I get in are either books like a book I featured in my last video, The Mouse That Roared, that I read when I was in high school and wanted to read again, and I did. Since that video, I've read that book. Great experience. It was just as good now as it was when I read it for the first time in high school. But but that was one book out of 3 dozen or so that I had hunted out in the wild. I kept one, donated about 30 some. Um, and the weeks since then, I've had the same kind of pattern. I'm going out, and as I do work, I'm out hunting for interesting books. And I've gotten a few dozen books. Most of those went out, but unfortunately, I noticed that out of those books, I found 8, once again, that I intend to keep. And I'm going to go through those, and we can decide, are my dragonish symptoms coming back, or not? But in any event, here we go. Um, First book I'm going to show you is a book I found at a thrift store that I get to go to maybe every couple of months. Franz Kafka, Pictures of a Life by Klaus, probably in German, Wagenbach. Um, a pictorial biography of Franz Kafka, who wrote The Castle and, of course, Metamorphosis. An author I've enjoyed, that I'm very interested in. Definitely going to read this. So my thought and judgment is, well, I'm going to read it and perhaps consult in the future. This is one to keep, but I don't count it as being a dragon book, shall we say, because it is. It's going to be of use to me. It's not just an object sitting on a shelf that I'm hoarding. Uh, the next book is Midnight Dreary, The Mysterious Death of Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe is an author that I really love, have read widely. And this, I presume, is going to be um, a very niche biography of the end of his life and maybe his legacy. Fully intend to read it. Whether I keep it or not, I don't know. A lot of it's going to depend on how much I enjoyed the experience. I don't think I currently have. In fact, I know I don't. I don't currently have any Poe biography, so it's not going to be duplicating anything I already have. So therefore, it's going to be of use. I'm actually going to read it. Um, Therefore, it's not um, falling into the dragon category. And the Edgar Allan Poe book is one of 2 books that I'm going to show you that I got at a library sale where you fill a plastic grocery bag for $1. And I stuffed that thing. So um, its cost to me was, I guess if you divvied it completely up, maybe a dime. So, once again, it's I don't think unfairly encumbering my life, and also it cost me very little. Now, the next 3 books I'm going to show you. Oh, let's show you this one first. All right, this is Spoon River Anthology by Edgar Lee Masters. Spoon River was a river that ran close to his house, I believe in Indiana. This is a book of poetry from the early 20th century. It's a very nice, as you can see, a very nice Signet Classic edition. Okay, so I'm drawn to these things. This was free on a different library's giveaway card. And I tend to do that. If I see that Signet emblem, I tend to snatch. Um, Most of the time, it's to donate it to the bookstore to help bolster their collection of classic literature. As I think I've indicated before, we're in an area with 3 colleges. Yeah, 3 colleges. Um, there's a market locally for classic literature. So normally that would go to the store, but I don't have this one, so it's staying with me. Am I ever going to read it? No. Let's see. The next one is the other book. Yes, the other book I got in that fill a bag for $1 sale uh, at a library, and this is a Penguin classic, John W. DeForest's Miss Ravenel's Conversion from Secession to Loyalty. Um, and with this one, um, it's of course Penguin Classic. It's in the style that Penguin Classics published from mid 80s to sometime in the 90s. This format, the bordered cover photo, black spine with a plain black penguin, um, and with the mark indicating source of the literature. In which case, this is an American one because it's that red color. Um, this one, although unlike the last one, I showed you, um, I might very well read this. It's about a man who was from the North just prior to the Civil War, settled in South Carolina, married a Southern woman, and then when the war started, he went back north and joined the Union Army, joined a Connecticut regiment, and fought for the Union in the Civil War. Um, I do enjoy historical fiction from that era. Was not familiar with this at all. Um, the chance of me reading this is not zero. It's probably not huge, but I could very well see myself reading this. So it's a little less dragonish than the last book I showed you, but there's still some dragon DNA in that book choice. The next four I found at another library's Little Free Library. And it's an area that I only get to go to every couple months. And when I make those work trips, there are several locations I'll stop at. There's a couple of thrift stores, as many as 3 branches of public libraries, and a couple of little free libraries associated with them. But when I pulled into the parking lot across the street from this one library, I looked across and saw their little free library, and it's a typical one, open glass window so you can see what's in. And at a distance of about 30 feet, I saw these sitting inside it. And so I rushed across the street to take a look at these because I know these much longer distances than 30 feet. This big hardback is a Library of America edition of the writings um, of Eugene Welty, who was an American Southern writer from Mississippi, um, writing in the early to mid 20th century, short story writer. That's all I know about her, but this is a collection of several of her short story collections, as well as a collection of her essays, and also a memoir, some autobiographical writing that she did. Uh, I love these Library of America books just as objects. They all have this format, the black with the red, white, and blue striping, typically a photograph of the author on the front. And if you look at the naked hardcover, you know, the texture, I mean, they're very simple, but they're very beautiful books, very durable. You've got, the ribbon bookmark. You've got printing on very white, acid-free paper. So they're very durable. They'll last forever. Um, and like I say, I have a weakness for these things. So if I see one, I'm going to grab it. And if I don't already if I already have it, it's going to get donated to the bookstore. But I don't have this one, so it's staying with me. Um, do I ever intend to read it? Maybe, but I have to admit it's going to be a very low percentage. There's many books to read. Don't know when I'll be able to get to this one. Maybe, maybe, a firm maybe. I do like Southern literature, and I got a good feeling maybe she's better than Faulkner, which would be good, so I can get that Southern style lit and hopefully have a very good, enjoyable experience. The next three books that were in that little free library, um, a more modern Penguin Classic edition of John Steinbeck's uh, Travels with Charlie in Search of America. Just reading the back of the book. Um, this was written in the early 60s by Steinbeck, documenting his travels around small towns in America with his poodle Charlie. Travel book. Probably a little more likely to read this than the last, because I do like travel logs. Uh, and it's, as you can see, pretty small book. It does have a little tear right here, which I will try and doctor. But, like I said, higher chance of reading this than the Eugenia Welty. At least parts of it, because this is going to be episodic. Uh, but it's a Penguin classic, and once again, those are like gold to me. Um, the next two I found are some of the older style ones. This is Wilkie Collins' The Law and the Lady. Wilkie Collins was a Victorian era writer in England. Wrote in what was called the sensationalist style, both in his personal life and in his writing. Um, Wilkie Collins kind of pushed the envelope, wrote about uh, subjects that at the time were considered taboo or very edgy. I think modern readers probably would scratch their heads and wonder what the big deal was. But he's most famous for a book called The Woman in White, which I already have. Um, and this is one that I, did not know about or have not heard about, The Law and the Lady. But it's in that same sort of genre. Um, and of course, it's a penguin. So once again, I'm drawn to it like moth to a flame. Do I intend to read it? Uh, Probably about as much of a chance of me reading this as the Eugenia Welty book. Um, if I read Wilkie Collins, probably I would read The Woman in White before reading this one, because that's his most famous one and it's thought to be his most significant work. So even amongst the Wilkie Collins books I have now, two, it's probably not going to be my first pick. So, so yeah, there's some dragonish stuff going on by me keeping this one forever. And the last one I have is Henry Mayhew's um, London Labor and the London Poor. And just reading the back of the book, and I vaguely remembered this author. Henry Mayhew was an English journalist who wrote about the working and poor classes in London, their lives, conditions, um, those sorts of things. From a journalistic perspective, the first edition of this, according to the back here, was published in England in the early 1850s, in three parts. And then in 1861, he added a fourth section to the work, and this is based on that 1861 edition. But it's a penguin, has that interesting cover art, in the style that Penguin Classics was publishing from the mid 80s to the 90s. Um, Color coded, fact. Yeah. I think orange is English fiction, and this one signifies nonfiction. I need to revisit that. But in any event, the color codings at the top tell you, the source. Um, Roman, Greek, American, modern, so on and so forth. But it's a Penguin Classic, and as you can see, I've got more than a few, and this will be taking its place up there and staying there forever. Will I read this? Probably the least likely to read this one of any of the ones I've showed you so far. But my intent at this point is to keep it forever. Now, the only saving grace, I suppose, if you can call it that, is that with all of these books, except for maybe the Kafka biography, if somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, I'd really like to have that," I would probably give it up. Um, the thing being, with a couple of exceptions, I don't think too many people are going to tap me on the shoulder and ask me that. So, well, and even the Kafka book, I do want to read it, and if I've read it completely, and um, then at that point I might be amenable to the same kind of thing, to giving it to someone else so they can share in that good experience. I'm hoping it's a good experience. I don't see why it wouldn't be. But in any event, so obviously after telling you about how I'm trying to move away from being a book dragon, it looks like I still have many of the symptoms that I'm not quite recovered yet. As one of my favorite characters in one of my favorite movies said in a classic quote, my hypocrisy knows no bounds. And when it comes to books, I got plenty of hypocrisy. Um, I've been, as I said, I've been trying to move away from being a dragon here for several months, but obviously I still got work to do. In any event, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you again very soon. Thank you.